Thanks, Wayne. Yes, I'm middle-aged now. He's filling us all in on how old we're getting. If you don't know me, I am an elder at the church. I am not a public speaker, and lucky for you, I only do this once in a while. I joke with Wayne. Wayne once said, we're at the bottom of the barrel, do you want to preach? And so now, apparently they're at the bottom of the barrel again, and here I am. So,
Josh, I'm going to say what I said at my mother's memorial service. She was not a public speaker, but she was very outspoken. I think you fit that.
And to that point, I come from a construction background. Most of my life I've worked in construction or farm and since I was a little kid. And so my background and the way I address things are usually right to the point. And it may be because I'm not talented enough to come. I like preachers that can make a full circle and come around to their point, and by the time you get to their point, you're like, wow, that's what they were saying. I don't do that. I'm pretty much straight to the point, and like I said, mostly because in the construction world I live in, you got to be to the point. This is what I want, this is how I want it, and this is how it's going to be. And so I do struggle, and like I said, maybe it is a lack of just being able to have the mental preparedness to come around to full circle, but we're right to it. And so the topic I'm going to speak about today is a topic that I've been getting a lot in all, from our board meetings to work to my salesmen at work, talk about what is going on in America. You're going to have to excuse me a minute. It feels like I just put 10 yards of dirt into the back of a dump truck. I'm sweating. I think I'd rather be on a job site, but Lord has me here. And to another point that I do feel it's a great responsibility to speak about the word of the Lord. And to me, at some points, even when I'm preparing a sermon, it's overwhelming. And so I'd like to open this up to prayer. Lord, I thank you that we have this church, Lord. Lord, I just pray that I can bring truth to today and bring out what you want me to bring out, Lord. Get me out of the way. Lord, your word, Lord, needs to be proclaimed. And Lord, this morning, if I'm the person that has to be up here, Lord, I just pray that your hand be on me. In your name I pray. Amen. So to the topic that everybody's been, what's going on in America? Where are we at? Why do we see the things we see? And I'm just going to bring a little rundown. The other day I had my nephew who's working with me, and he's a young kid, and he goes, at the end of the day, he says, man, my hands hurt. And then I didn't want to tell him, if you're in construction for any long periods of time, everything's going to hurt. So I didn't want to really bust his, I just said, you'll be okay. But really, if you're in construction for a long period of time, you just notice the aches and pains, and you get used to them. And I think, as a Christian, I think over my lifetime as a Christian, there's a lot of aches and bruises that we just go through. And we've kind of just gotten, I don't say used to them, but that's just our Christian walk. We just get discouraged by what we see, and it's just where we're at today. And so, not like my nephew, I didn't want to bring up, you're going to have back pains, you're going to have neck pains, but you're going to have, everything's going to hurt you at some point. I didn't want to tell him that, but this morning, I'm going to just kind of go down, what's going on? I'm going to list some of the pains that we're kind of going through as a society here. Everybody wants to know, we see just chaos. We see suicide, drug overdoses, divorces, homicides, all at record levels. And that's pre-pandemic. That's not during, this is all 2019. Perry Jones, which a lot of you know, he's the director for the Capital City Mission in Albany. He came up and he told us they protested at his office buildings. They started fires. City councilmen don't want him in Albany. Why would that be? In this world, an organization that helps homeless people, people that are in need. These are mind-boggling things that we see in society. We see rewriting of history. We see science being manipulated to a narrative. We see all that. You watch the news, you see one thing, and then a day later they're telling you a different thing, and they contradict each other. What's going on? I think I wrote down a few of these things, and these are right from the CDC, and I got them in 2019, so like I said, pre-pandemic. In 2019, 47,500 deaths by suicide, 71,000 deaths by drug overdose. Between 1999 and 2019, suicides have increased by 33%. In ages 10 to 24, these are our young future Americans, future people. 60%, they've increased 60%. And this is pre-pandemic. We can't blame this on COVID-19. So this is a different pandemic that we're not talking about. There's a lot of hurt. In 2017, which CDC had this information, 10.6 million people thought about suicide, 3.2 million people made a plan, 1.4 million people attempted it. We have a problem. We have a pandemic, a different pandemic. I'm going to say this, and this may be a little controversial, but we are living in a post-constitutional, post-Christian America that was founded as a Judeo-Christian country with limited government and is now a pagan country with limited liberties. We may not like it, but that's where we are as a church today. So, how do we get here? Well, we have the normal culprit. And a wise man once said, behind every evil, a conspiracy behind every evil, is Satan. That was my father that said that once, so I'll give him credit. But we read the Bible, and I wrote down just a few of the names that Satan is called in the Bible: the destroyer, the adversary, the deceiver of the whole world, the enemy, the evil one, the father of lies, the god of this world, a liar, a murderer, a prince of the power of the air, the ruler of this world, and the tempter. So, our adversary, Satan, with all those titles, in my generation, I can say, I think over different generations, Satan's trying different tactics. But in our generation, if you look at all the churches, you won't see my generation in most churches. Are very underrepresented. Our generation and generations younger aren't coming to church. Why are they not coming to church? This is a question we talk about at board meetings all the time. I've prayed a lot about this. I've thought a lot about this. And the father of lies had deceived our generation into believing there's no absolute truths. So, I'll talk at work, I talk to people a lot, and you'll hear things like, well, that's true for you, but not for me. There's no real truth. Truth is relative. Speak your truth. That's a big one. You'll hear all the time. You'll see it even in commercials. Speak your truth. Well, what's your truth? So, John 8:44, and we're speaking about Satan again. He, Satan, does not stand in truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks it from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. So, if Satan can convince people that there is no truth, if there's not any real, then really, where does the morals come from that we say that we have? Our morals come from, if you look into it, moral relativism is the whole idea that has been taught to us in schools. Our generation and the younger generations, that it comes from society. So if you're getting your morals from society, and then what's okay is a majority of what people think, well then you can come up with anything. There is no real basic And then we get stuck in our sin. And then our sin is okay because we can say, well, look at it. There's a lot of other people that have this problem. And then we snowball. What does Jesus say? John 8:31. If you continue in my word, then you are a true disciple of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. We think we think our freedom comes from the Constitution, but it doesn't. It comes from truth. And it comes from Jesus. And our founders knew that and created a Constitution. But without truth, our Constitution is falling apart. It's the foundation. Truth is the foundation of our faith and of our freedoms. John 18:37. Therefore Pilate said to him, to Jesus, so you are a king? And Jesus answered, you say correctly that I am a king. For this I have been born, and for this I have come into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Jesus is the truth. There is no, well, he's true for you, but not for me. No, unfortunately, for some people, he is true. You just don't believe that he's true. And Satan is deceiving us into believing that. And at some points, it comes right into the church. Because I even hear people say, well, he believes this. Or there could be other ways. And not too long ago, I had a conversation. If you believe that there's other ways other than Jesus, then you may not be a Christian. No, you are not a Christian. There is only one way. So, with all that good, cheery news, where are we headed? Where are we headed as a nation? I think are two questions. And where are we headed as a church? The nation, I think it depends. I think our nation was founded because of our adherence to godly principles. So without godly principles, are we going to have a country? We'll have a country, but is it going to look like the country that we've had up to this point? The church will persevere. Me and Alan went to the Ukraine, and in the Ukraine there was a church we visited that was vibrant and had lots of people. But that church had been a church pre-Soviet. That church had gotten outlawed. That church had to go underground. That church, for decades, couldn't meet together. Steve told me that they couldn't join together and meet. They had to meet in people's houses in secrets for decades. But yet, the church persevered. And when we were there, you wouldn't know it was any different than our church here. You wouldn't know they had gone through decades of rough times. And rougher times than we can even imagine. It was outlawed. They would take the people, send them to Siberia if they found them practicing. Rough times. So, don't worry. The church will persevere. And I know so because it says in the Bible, throughout all times there will be a witness. But that doesn't mean that things are always going to be the way they are today. The church will persevere, but it will look different than it does today. I got three little points here. Like a good Baptist sermon, you should have three good points. And so what do? So I just laid out where we're at, and I really don't think many people, they may argue with some nuances of my points here, but really won't argue if you're living today that we don't have some major problems, and major problems with younger people, and major problems in our country. So what are we going to do? I think one of the issues, and this may be another one that may be a little controversial, and it was for me. Not too many years ago, a president of the United States said, we're not a Christian country, and I actually got a little offended. But then I really did some research, and we were a Christian country, but we no longer push Christian values. around the world like the United States used to. We have missions that we send individually from churches, but our country used to promote pretty much a biblical worldview of everywhere they went. But now they promote abortions in Africa, they're promoting major things that are contradictory to the Bible all across. Our government does this, and it's a major funder of all these things around the world. So, like I said, I was a little offended, but I think as a church we have to let go, and this is going to be hard because I'm nostalgic. I'm big. Chris knows, my family knows. Church history, I just kind of like church history. I love church history. But I think in a way we have to let go of the nostalgia for our 1950s church. I'm going to explain this because if somebody said that to me, I may be a little offended. But the church was complementary to our Christian culture. This week I was at a job, and it kind of just in my mind went to it because I was thinking a lot about this sermon, and the cabinet guy came in, and he does high-end cabinets. And he said, we're doing electric, and he says, Josh, you wouldn't believe the job I was just at. He said, we're putting in a kitchen, a beautiful kitchen. They do high-end. I don't know the amount of money, but probably $40,000. He said, I went down to the basement, and the water's just pouring in, and the basement's kicking out. He said, the house is in bad shape, and they're hiring me to come and do finish work and put in a cabinet, and not address some foundational issues that you should address. And I think, like I said, I think sometimes the way we've been kind of directed was we had a Christian foundation in this country. It was the default. So you may not have had a lot of Christians, but it was a default mechanism that had moral Christian values. And so we were doing the cabinetry and the finished work of somebody's life that had been brought up. A Sunday school teacher may have also been their kindergarten teacher, was working in the schools, was doing all of these foundational Christian moral bringing up, and then the church was helping them do the finished work of getting them to Jesus Christ. I'm sorry to say, that's not happening in our culture anymore. The foundational work is eroding. And so then when people come into church and we don't believe, kids have been taught, and my age has been definitely taught, that, well, truth is what you want to believe, and then we're trying to direct somebody, it's not going to work. And it's not working. It is not working for the mass majority of my generation. It is not working. And so, what do we have to do? I think we'll have to get back to some foundation building. We send missionaries around the world. Unfortunately, I think we need missionaries right here in our culture and in our society today. I think we need to start doing the heavy lifting. And I do want to say, too, I have nothing wrong with the 1950s church. In the 1950s church, I think the 1950s church was exactly where God wanted them to be in the 1950s. Because, like I said, I think there was a foundation. And so they were building off a foundation that was built by earlier generations. People that had come here for religious freedoms and had done the hard missionary work in this country. But at some point, Satan has snuck in there and started chipping away at things that we've seen but not known how to address. So, this is to a point that Dave actually made, not too many. Maybe it was the last business meeting, but we had to skip some business meetings. We need to address some of this foundational problems. And why don't we sometimes address it? And in our Sunday school, we talked a little about why it's hard to address these things. Because I think when we do try to address it, we address, just like I said, maybe the 1950s church, and then we get offended because that was a church in the church style in which we were brought up in. It was a church style in which we enjoy, but the culture has changed. So, my number 2 point is, I don't think we can worry about offending or being offended if we're in the truth. Sunday school, we just talked about Jesus didn't really worry about offending. It's all throughout. The disciples, they don't worry about offending when they're in the truth. We have to do it in compassion. We have to do it in love. But we cannot tell these young people that you can do whatever you want to do. You can be whoever you want to be, and then expect them to somehow, with all these things that are in our culture today, say, well, I'm going to want to follow Christ because it looks fun, and we try to make it fun. But culture has all sorts of other things that are fun. And so we need to get to the truth. And so the truth is not allowing people to just totally live in sin and to be deceived. And we're in a weird culture that now we can't even say, sir, ma'am, because somehow that is offensive. God made man and woman. We're in a weird time. And as Christians, I don't know that we know really, we don't want to offend people, but God made you to be you, not to try to be someone else. And I think we are struggling with this, and we're struggling to be able to say to people, because they say, well, you're a hater then, and we don't want to be labeled as a hater. But then we're allowing people to go down a road that is destructive. And so, I don't think we have to worry about being offensive. And my Bible verses for this is Matthew 5:11. And if blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is in heaven is great. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. If we are just telling everybody or ignoring any kind of real truth, then why, if we're following Jesus, would we be persecuted? So what is Jesus saying? Well, blessed are you when people insult you. Well, why would they insult you? If we are being non-offensive to anyone, why would we get insulted? In this culture, we are insulted because we are calling out truth. We are calling out God's truth. And that offends people. So if we are calling out God's truth, we can no longer not be offensive. In Romans 12:18, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And a lot of times we'll say, Christians, live at peace. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you. That doesn't mean don't be who Jesus wants you to be and proclaim the witness and the truth. And then this is my last point, my third point. Don't bow down. Know what you believe and be ready to defend it. And we're going to go to the Old Testament for this one. And it's one that we're taught in Sunday school. It's a very easy one. Nebuchadnezzar, he's a king, he makes a golden idol. He says to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, most of us know this story, bend down, bow. They don't bow. Why don't they bow? Because they just don't like the king? No, because they know God doesn't want them to bow to foreign idols. They know what they believe, and they know, and they're ready to defend it. In Daniel 3:16, they're dragged out. Before this, you have to bow down if there's music playing or whatever, and the idol, and you have to bow down. And they're not doing it. So people bring them out. Hey, those guys aren't doing it. They're offending us because they're not bowing down to our idols. So they get dragged up. And this, I like this. So the king drags them out in front of them. And in 3:16, he says, he lists what they're doing wrong. And they don't say, well, we're sorry, you know, we got a list of reasons why we can't do this. We shouldn't really be doing this, but can we get, please, I know we'll maybe bow a little sideways for you. We can't go. They don't do that. They say to him, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter." Amen. Amen.
Amen.
We're following God. You're a king. We follow God. And we know why we follow God, and we're ready. Hey, if you're going to, I'll read the rest of that. He says, "If it is to be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of the blazing fire. And he will deliver us out of your hands, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your God or worship the golden image that you have set up." They were ready. They knew what they had to do. And they were ready. And they weren't concerned. I mean, we know the story. God comes, save them from the fire. But even if we're not going to get saved from the fire, we know what we believe, and we're ready to defend it. We do not have to answer to you, King Nebuchadnezzar.
Amen. Double amen.
And so, know what you believe, be ready to defend it. And God will be there with you in all circumstances. And like I said, in the end of this, that turns out like a good story. But not always is everything so rosy. So while our politicians set up these idols that they want us to bend down to, they set up all these different situations and holes we have to jump through. And I've heard it, and rightly so, a lot of times, well, I don't like preaching on different subjects that offend me. Or those are political. Well, Christian, all things that we're dealing with are political in nature. Nebuchadnezzar was a king. These guys were making a political statement that we are not bowing down to you. So, in the Christian church, today they've made laws, and if you're tax exempt, you're not supposed to endorse a candidate. And we've taken that to the extreme of where I've heard you can't talk about anything that may be offensive. You may not talk about any politics. That is not what is in our Constitution or biblical or what these guys are doing in the Old Testament. They made a political statement that we are following God. Not a political statement, we like this candidate better than that candidate, we like this better than that, and so no. Listen, as a church following Christ, we are following God, and some of that crosses into our politics. And more so now that what we talked about earlier, that the foundation that was a Christian default in our society is eroding away and eroding away fast. And so now, more and more, we are going to have to make stands that we didn't have to make. The 1950s church did not have to make. They did not have to make. They did not have issues like abortions or traditional marriages. They had none of those issues. They did not have the absolute truth. They knew what the truth was. Not, oh, your truth is right for you. 1950s, there wasn't an argument. And so today, our culture is crumbling. And so, my 3 points is, 1, we have to let go of that nostalgia for 1950s, in which was a heyday for a Christian church. We have to be mission-oriented in America. 2, don't worry about offending this culture. This culture doesn't worry about offending us. And 3, know what you believe and be ready to defend it, and don't bow down. That's all I got.
Thank you, Josh. Amen. Amen.